talking about the social dimensions of the coinage of David I, which is really, really interesting. So the outline of my sort of presentation today is so I'll start off with giving you a brief introduction of what David I's coins look like and a brief chronology and history of them before moving on to new research that investigated the silver content and the material sources used in the actual production of the Scottish coinage under David. I'll also talk about the circulation of these coins. So we'll focus on broadly through England and Scotland. And then I'll finally talk about the role of imagery on these coins and what they actually meant and the importance for David of producing these coins. And then finally, I will tie this all together, hopefully in a nice, neat discussion. So to start, so as a brief intro to the Scottish coinage, David I was the very first Scottish king to actually mint a native Scottish coinage. And he did this probably from 1136 when he took control of the city of Carlisle following Henry I's death in 1135. Now, David was already a well-known figure in the city and the local area of northern Cumbria. So unlike what Duncan was just talking to us about a big siege works, Carlisle was never under siege by David. He just walked in, basically. Is the simplest term, and took control of Carlisle's working mint, which was first established in the early 1120s during the reign of Henry I, when they discovered important silver mines in the local area. So to give you a sense and a broad sort of very basic chronology of these coins of David, some of them, as I'll talk you through them, can potentially be related to some of these broader historical events during the anarchy. So the very first Scottish coins we get that David produced in Carlisle and also Edinburgh were these types copying the English coins. So this first one here, can you guys see in the corner? So this first one here copies the last type of Henry I. This one, the cross mulline and list type, copies the very first type of King Stephen. This one, the cross and annulets type, was a broad copy of an earlier type of Henry I. But the most distinctive coins of David I that we get that doesn't copy an English design and is purely a design from David's perspective is this one, the cross flurry and pellets type. So this last coin represents the most common type of David's coin that we find and was issued from a number of mints. So I'll briefly talk about the mints under David I before moving on to the silver analysis. So as I already mentioned in the introduction, David took control of Carlisle with its working mint, and this was the first sort of kind of mint that produced coins in the name of David. It's also worth mentioning that David's son, Earl Henry, and I'll come to him towards the end of the talk, also issued his own coinage. And of course, in Neil's presentation, he showed us a very nice Corbridge coin of Earl Henry. So it's also important to know that alongside David's coins in Carlisle, Earl Henry also issued coins from Carlisle, Corbridge, and Bamborough. But David also established his own mints in Scotland proper. And a very, very this is a working theory. This is my current working theory of the chronology of the opening of mints in Scotland proper after Carlisle. So David very quickly establishes a mint in Edinburgh, and thanks to a very, very new, recently discovered coin, we actually now have a coin of the Edinburgh mint of this type, whereas previously it was only thought that only Carlisle under David minted this type in David's name. But thankfully now we have one of Edinburgh of that type in David's name, which suggests that Edinburgh the Edinburgh Mint was opened up very, very quickly after David's acquisition of Carlisle. And then following on from Edinburgh, we have smaller mints such as Perth, which produced, at the moment, we think produced just this type. Edinburgh also produced this type, the Crossmoline and List type. And then more broadly, when we get to this period, the Crossflurry and Pellets type, we see more mints opened up. So we see Roxburgh opened up. We see Berwick. We also see a very small mint at St Andrews. And very, very possibly, there was also a very minor mint at St Andrews, though there was only literally one coin in existence, which is now unfortunately lost, supposedly from the St Andrews Mint, which is of the Crossflurry and Pellet type. So basically, we need more of these coins to turn up. So date speaking, we think that date-wise, the last type, David's very first coinage, this type probably dates to probably about the late 1130s. The Crossmoline type potentially dates again to late 1130s to early to mid 1140s. This type, the crescent, the pellets, the cross and pellets type, probably dates to the same period as these two. And then the cross Moline and pellets type, the broad type, probably dates from the late 1140s and was also issued probably after David's death as well. So this coin type was probably issued probably right up until the early 1170s, or maybe early or late mid 1160s, during the reign of William the Lion. But the exact chronology and dates of these coins is not set in stone. Basically, what we need is a huge hoard of these from Scotland to turn up to help with dating. So and now I'll move on to the silver content of the coinage. So this is relatively new research, and the full article is due to be published, in fact, in the next month or so, in the forthcoming edition of the British Numismatic Journal, which I co-authored along with several of my co-researchers from Cambridge and Holland who were involved in this project. So what we did for this one, this will all sound very, very sci-fi, is we used the process called laser ablation analysis, which, for those who don't know, is you take, it's normally used for silver, so it could be any silver object, a coin or an early medieval ingot, and you put it under a laser, and it just takes a little snick out of the object. And what you do with that is then you put it into solution, chemical solution, and then it's analyzed. So we can do all sorts of stuff with it, looking at silver content and also lead isotope analysis, which I'll come on to in a bit. But what is really interesting that this new research has discovered is that coins of David I, issued from his Scottish mint, so Edinburgh, Berwick, and Roxburgh, are all contain less silver than the corresponding coins that were issued from Carlisle, and also later Scottish coins issued under William the Lion. So we also tested a contemporary Carlisle mint of Earl Henry, which is here at the top, and we can see that all the silver contents of the Carlisle coins of Earl Henry and later Henry II, they all contain over 90% silver, whereas the coins of David from the Scottish mints contain sort of a nice sort of neat range of the late 80s, so 80% silver, which sort of really challenges the old theory that the Scottish coins under David were produced to the same standard as the corresponding English coins. And of course, this research has actually shown that actually the coins that David issued in Scotland actually contained less silver. And again, we can see it quite clearly here on this graph. So those little nice blue diamonds there are the David coins, and these are all the other ones with the higher silver the higher silver content. So what can this actually tell us about silver sources? What was supplying these Scottish mints? And thankfully, with the laser ablation analysis, we can begin to get a sense of the silver source of these coins. And this graph neatly explains it. So the current held theory that when David took control of Carlisle, he gained control of the silver mines, and those silver mines are what powered David's mints in Scotland. But this new analysis says otherwise. We certainly know that these two coins here at the top, the Earl Henry and the Henry II, both from the Carlisle Mint, matches the profile for the Alston silver. So the Alston was known as the mine of Carlisle, which is characterized by low gold and low to moderate bismuth levels, which the Earl Henry coin of Carlisle and the Henry II of Carlisle show. But the coins of David I, issued from Edinburgh, do not fit this profile. In fact, what we can see here, these lovely 3 diamonds in all this mishmash of other symbols, is actually showing that the coins David was issuing from Edinburgh, Roxburgh, and Berwick were not coming from the Alston silver mines at all. They were actually coming from silver sources that broadly reflects silver stock that was more or less broadly circulating in England, in 12th century England. And it was actually produced from recycled silver from this broad silver stock, rather than fresh silver mined from the mines of Carlisle, which begins to really now challenge this old theory that merchants and all prospectors from Scotland, when David took control, carted off bucket loads of silver to the Scottish mints. Well, this analysis evidence shows that actually might not be true, but in fact, the silver sources for the Scottish coinage of David are coming from a much broader silver stock that we see circulating across England. And the final part of this sort of analysis, we also looked at lead isotope analysis. Now, lead is important in the production of coins and the minting of coins through the refining process, refining the silver. And what we can do with the lead isotope analysis is actually identify the sources of lead that is actually being used in the Scottish mints to produce these coins. And this is where it gets interesting. I mentioned just before that the Scottish mints under David I were not using Alston silver, but they were using Alston lead, which basically means that the lead was coming from Alston, from northern Cumbria, to be used in the Scottish mints. And again, we can see here, sort of nice and clearly, with these coins, the David I of these nice little green triangles, and these are the profiles for the other Carlisle and Newcastle mint coins that we tested, and it nicely matches this Alston lead profile. And then when we tested the later William coins, we see now a different lead source. So William's coins are down here. So this lead source for the later William coins in the later 12th century, so the 1170s, 1180s, and 1190s, was actually coming from southern Scotland and not Alston. And that can potentially probably easily be explained by the loss of or the reversion back to English control of Carlisle and its silver and its mine sources in 1157, when Malcolm IV was persuaded to hand them back to Henry II. So I'll just sort of do a really quick recap of that. So we can see that the Scottish mints, they were not using Alston silver, but they were using Alston lead. So that's actually quite interesting, because it gives an insight into these sources and movement around and of the raw materials used to produce these coins. So the second sort of dimension rather of a coinage, and particularly of David I, is actually looking at its circulation, its broader circulation. You know, where are these things being found? And we can see from this my distribution map here that they're not only found in Scotland, but they're also found broadly across England. And this is actually quite the English context of this period is actually quite interesting, as Duncan mentioned in his talk previously about the archaeology of the anarchy. Coinage is a really good motivator to actually see this, because what happens as royal control breaks down over England, any powerful lord or ecclesiastic whose worth is salt begins to produce his own coinage. Now, coinage was a very, very closely guarded royal prerogative, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, about why David might have been interested in producing his own coinage. But the breakdown of royal authority and the issuing of all these local coinages in England meant that these local coinages developed very distinct circulation patterns, which meant they didn't circulate outside their locales or their lord's territories. There could be sort of multiple reasons for this. These feudal issues were often produced with much poorer quality silver, and the higher quality official coinage of Stephen may have been culled in these local areas and used to produce this rubbish local coinage. Also, with the breakdown of royal control, and I think others will probably be more qualified to say this than I will. The breakdown of law and order in England during this Civil War period meant that long distance trade routes may have also broken down. But also, as well, imagery and iconography could have also played a part in this, because these local issues in England, some of them broadly copied Stephen, but others depicted knights, they depicted bishops, they depicted knights on horseback, which was not royal imagery. So they may have been sort of refused based on that. This isn't an official coin. It's just basically some local lord's coin, and it may not have been accepted out of that local lord's locale. But turning back now to David's coins, we know from the limited hoard evidence, and in one in particular is Outchester from Northumberland, that was deposited potentially during the 1173 war when William invaded as part of Henry the Young King's rebellion against Henry II, did contain a number of coins of David and also Earl Henry, which does suggest that even after David had died, and after the coinage in England and probably Scotland had been reformed, that these coins were still in circulation. David's coins were still in broad circulation in at least northern England and Scotland well after David had died. And the probably maximum date that they probably would have been in circulation would probably been about the 1170s or the 1180s. But again, we need more hoard evidence from this period to really start confirming this. And I mentioned sort of briefly before in the introduction that coins were issued in David's name after he died. And it's probably that probably still continued roughly probably into the early reign of William the Lion. We certainly know that during Malcolm IV's reign, David's successor, that coins of David were still probably issued in David's name as well, given the various succession issues and threats that the young Malcolm faced. So more archaeological evidence can be gleaned of where these coins actually found. So in Scotland, we have one coin found at the Ecclesiastical Centre at Whithorn, and we've got 3 others found at the Cambus Kenneth Ford. Of course, Murray will be talking about that later on. And this picture here is one of the Cambus Kenneth David I sterlings minted at Berwick. But the vast majority, and we've got other finds as well, that were found during archaeological excavations such as Aberdeen, or associated with or close to settlements such as Kirkcudbright and Meryton in Angus. So we've got to be really sort of careful when we're associating coin finds with settlements or other types of site. By association, they may look really close together on a map, but by association, they would probably be within less than a kilometre of the modern town. So they were found within the peripheries of these settlements. But most of these coins are found in rural fields, discovered and are now discovered to this day by metal detecting. Now, the old traditional view is of how do these coins end up in the field? The old traditional view is that, medieval peasants took them into the fields when they were working and they lost them through holes in their pocket. But thankfully, new archaeological theories over the years are beginning to disprove this. And that we probably think now that a lot of these medieval coins that we're finding in these fields are not a result of peasants taking them into the fields, but they're actually a result of waste disposal from settlements, and also manuring on fields. So these coins, when you think about it, they get less lost in the domestic household or courtyard, are swept up, and then are deposited on the fields with the manure and also the other household rubbish. But they're also quite important as well as evidence of peasant activity. And it gives us a sense, particularly in David's reign, when this coinage was first starting up, about who was having access, who was actually using these coins. And we can actually glean potential some answers of who was using them, who had access to them based on their archaeological context, where these things are found. And thankfully, through metal detecting, we are now seeing a lot more of these David I coins that are now being found in rural areas, whereas previously they were found in the larger towns and the boroughs, which were beginning to be established under David, so big important centres. So again, this is starting to now challenge the traditional view held on David's coins, that was only a select group of people who are actually using them. So the final part I will talk about is imagery, the iconography of a coin. So what was the purpose of the imagery on these coins? Basically, it was to display the identity of a ruler or a state. And so when a nation or a state started producing its own coinage, it didn't have, such as David I did. They often copied the coins of other coin-producing nations. So we've got examples all across Europe. We've got the Normans in Sicily, and also the Crusader states imitating Byzantine and Arabic coins. And David was no exception in that he imitated the English types in circulation at the time for his first coinage, before establishing his own wider design issued at all the mints then currently in operation. But why there could, so that is one theory about potentially why David may have all copied the English coins. But it's also worth mentioning that from the Carlisle mint, but also from the Bamborough mint, both David and Earl Henry also issued coins in the name of Stephen. So David didn't issue coins in the name of Stephen from his Scottish mint, but he did from Carlisle. So this may have been political prudence, in that when David first occupied Carlisle in 1136, and throughout the 1130s, after the Battle of the Standard and the early 1140s, when Stephen and his supporters still had a relatively strong position in Northern England, that David and Earl Henry's hold over these areas was not solidified. They were still a bit on shaky ground. And as King Stephen was recognised or claimed to be the feudal superior of these areas under Scottish in Northern England under Scottish control, it may have been political prudence from David and Earl Henry's thinking, actually, our hold's not great here. Let's keep Stephen happy by issuing coins in his own name. But from Stephen's perspective, this was actually quite good. because coins issued by a legitimate ruler also had a way of legitimizing a ruler's right to rule. And the fact is, as we've heard from several talks already, that Stephen was fighting his rival for the throne, Henry's daughter, Matilda. The fact that David and Earl Henry were issuing coins in Stephen's name, but not Matilda's name, meant that they were actually publicly legitimizing and recognizing Stephen's right to rule as King of England and not Matilda. So that's also kind of an important way of the imagery and the iconography is communicating that legitimate message from a ruler or a state to this wider audience. And from David's perspective, it actually meant that he was able to promote or project his idea of kingship as a legitimate ruler to a much wider audience by anybody who is using these coins. So anybody who is in England who is using these coins, if the legends were decipherable, could actually tell that actually this coin was minted by King David. And this goes back to the distribution map, as I mentioned earlier, why we are seeing during the anarchy where coinage in England becomes much more confined to its local circulation areas, that David's coins are much more widespread, is because it depicts a legitimate ruler producing coins of good silver. So that was also important as well. And then, of course, another potential reason why David might have wanted to use the English iconography in his coins was also when he was first setting up these coins, nobody knew what they were. Were they commercially good? Were they commercially trusted? But the English coins were. So that's probably another reason why David sought to imitate the English coins at the very establishment of this early Scottish coinage was to make the Scottish coinage commercially acceptable and trusted before then moving on to his own broad designs. So I'm going to throw this one out there because this part is literally relatively really new and early research. So this coin, a very intriguing coin, was brought to the attention of the medieval numismatic curator at the British Museum earlier this year, who got in touch with me asking, we know it's a David coin, we know it's a Carlisle coin because we've got the Errabald on Car mint signature. What is going on here? That is not a crowned, sorry, can you guys see? That is not a crowned bust. That is depicting a tower. So one of the early theories that we had is that actually, is this depicting one of David's strongholds, Carlisle or Roxburgh? Or, on the other hand, is it actually David's response to the Second Crusade? And this isn't, in fact, representing the Tower of Carlisle Castle, but the Tower of David in Jerusalem is the working theory. And what actually strengthens this argument is this coin here. So this is a unique coin of David currently in the NMS collections, displaying what could be interpreted here as a palm sprig. And I mentioned briefly just before, with the breakdown in royal control in England and everybody producing their own local coinage, there was one group of coins in Northern England known as the York Local Group that displayed palm sprigs on there, and these are deliberately interpreted as belonging to Crusade, or as a symbol of the Crusades and Crusaders. And it's currently thought, because this shares a lot of characteristics with coins with Crusader related imagery, the York local group, and also various deniers issued in the Crusader states. So this coin and that coin could be sort of direct sort of evidence of David's support for the idea of the Second Crusade and the support of the Crusaders in and the idea of crusading as well. But because these two coins are absolutely unique, we've got no other specimens anywhere. It could be that these formed. Another hypothesis is that these could have formed a very, very small set issued by David with the Crusader ideal, but maybe not meant for circulation, but maybe meant as a way of a token of gift giving or patronage to certain maybe certain holy orders or ecclesiastical institutions, rather than actually being intended for further circulation. But because we've only got two of them, we don't know. Is the short answer. But what it does highlight is that it's the power of imagery on these coins that can actually be used to showcase David's wider political aims. So finally, just to sort of neatly wrap all this up, so we've seen sort of the lower silver content of David's coins. And the reason potentially of that is it may be due to a lack of silver in Scotland, not by sort of deliberate attempt to make them lighter or with the less silver content than English coins. Because each of those three coins that we tested of David, each come from a different mint, Berwick, Roxburgh, and Edinburgh. Because there's such small variation, it indicates a really high degree of organization and operation of these things, tight royal control, which is how the mints were generally operated. And it can give us further insights into how aspects of the government in Scotland was changing under David I. So it's not just looking at sort of coins, it's looking at how these coins were produced and the level of organization and sophistication that would have been required from either a central government or from the household government that was developing under David to actually regulate and produce these coins. We also see as well that with the establishment of coins under David, that these are now starting to be they are starting to spread further from the markets, from the main sites as well, and more finding them more in rural locations. But also as well, this development of a coinage kind of also allowed David to gain political advantages over petty rulers on his borders, such as Somerlad in Argyll and Fergus of Galloway. And by projecting his idea of kingship to a much broader audience than these rulers, the petty rulers, were able to, but also it allowed David this and the development of much more higher level trading and sophistication in government organization in Scotland that we could see that would probably not have been possible without coinage, because David could use coinage as a way of rewarding followers, as gifts of patronage, and also as donations as well to various holy orders. And again, all this can be tied up in the idea of this notion of this coming together of Scotland, of what we see these different areas of Scotland. So Northern Scotland, Lothians, the idea that they're all using one coinage under one ruler could give a sense that, as we can see, that from other historical evidence, that if you've got various different sort of populations and ethnic backgrounds and with traditions all using one coinage under one ruler, you can give this sort of more broader collective sense that they're sharing one coinage, one currency, one monarch under David the First as well. And I deliberately didn't go into this today because this is a topic of a whole separate talk. We can also use the coinage of David and Earl Henry, their circulation patterns in Scotland and Northern England, perhaps as well to glimpse an insight into the political relationship between Earl Henry and David, who, according to according to the theory under Professor Barrow, operated the joint kingship in Northern England. Again, yeah, that is the subject of another talk. And finally, I shall just wrap this up by highlighting further work that we can do. Basically, we need to do more silver testing, particularly on more David I coins and Earl Henry coins, particularly from Carlisle, Corbridge, and Bamborough. We also need to do some silver testing on Malcolm IV and early William the coins to get a sense of, again, lead sources, to see whether that change of lead source from David to William is actually reflected in the coinage of Malcolm. And that, again, can potentially help build us a chronology of this coinage. Again, more research on spatial relationships between coin finds and sites, and that doesn't just stem from coins of David, that extends all the way through to the later medieval Scotland as well, where we get lots of coins. Again, the subject of several other talks. And again, we can go into further insights into the organisation and operation of Scottish mints under David, and also Scottish mining. And it leads off to so many different interesting further areas of research, such as state building and development of the organisation of government and David's relationship with wider political events of the world. So thank you very much.
I know it's